On this episode of ITAV, the FBI says reboot your router, backward compatibility and security, and what IT managers need to know about video over the network. All that and more, next on ITAV.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ITAV, episode 18, recorded Friday, June 1st, 2018. Convenience or death?
Support for AVNation is brought to you by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
This is the ITAV show. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. This is AVNation's monthly look at how IT and AV and the intersection between the two kind of actually impact both organizations and both groups. First and foremost, to join me to talk about the articles that we have gathered for this month. His name is George Tucker, and he is the left-hand side of my brain. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm all right on this pre-Infocom ATIV.
Yes, we're recording this on June 1st, actually posting it on June 1st, as long as nothing goes awry between now and posting time. Also with us is my buddy and pal and my IT, my IT brain, Mr. Michael Drainer. How are you, sir?
I guess it's better than being the left brain.
Well,
I'm doing well. Thanks for.
There's a political reason that I call George the left-hand side of my brain. I'm not going to
absolutely
mention the right-hand side. All right. As we gather here, George mentioned that on the eve of Infocom 2018 happens June 6th through the 8th. By the way, if you hadn't noticed that, and you can go by our website and check out all of our coverage, and there are tons of people doing coverage as well. This story comes to us from Spiceworks, and not for nothing, Spiceworks, if you're not familiar with Spiceworks, you need to be. If you're doing anything in IT, it's a great group of IT professionals. But they reference a story about IoT security and Z-Wave vulnerability. The story says, quote unquote, cybersecurity is an ever-evolving field where vulnerabilities are constantly discovered and then usually patched up, hopefully before things get too bad. Now, what this story is referencing is a report where a bunch of the Hacker News noticed a vulnerability in Z-Wave devices. And real quickly, and I am not a hacker, and nor do I play one on TV, so I'm going to try to briefly describe the vulnerability that they discovered and our conversation with the Z-Wave Alliance and the folks there, a couple of engineers. When you are installing it, there is a 20 millisecond vulnerability. Now, again, I'm simplifying this. What happens is when you're installing it, it allows the new generation of Z-Wave devices to talk to the old generation of network devices, of Z-Wave devices. Yes, if the Z-Wave Alliance decided that they wanted to eliminate that vulnerability, they could do that. However, what that would do is that would automatically kill every piece of backward compatibility. Referencing back the article, that would mean almost 100 million devices would be out of whack in some people's homes. Not everybody doesn't have $100 million devices, but over the course and the lifetime of Z-Wave, that's how many have been deployed. George, I want to start with you on this. This is when I first grabbed it, I was like, okay, this might be an issue, and this might be a story. And then talking with the Z-Wave folks, I was like, okay, this makes sense. Then the question in my head changed from, is this an issue, right? Is this an issue for folks who have Z-Wave devices, to more of a industry-wide best practices? And here's the question to you, Mr. Tucker. Mm-hmm. George used to work for a manufacturer, not for nothing. But when it comes to making sure that your devices are secure, but you also have to make sure that they work with the old stuff that you sold. So what's the fine line here? I mean, what is locking everything down and making sure that everything works to, making sure that it you can play well with others and play well with the old stuff?
It's a hard nut to crack, right, as to say, because it depends on length of time, right? And it depends on if you're trying to grow a system from an existing system. And that delineation really comes down to how many features do I really need to sell and the client wants versus stability of the system and the growth of an existing system. I know when I worked for Crestron that we had stuff that was 10, 15 years old that they were trying to still incorporate into the systems. The software supported it, but sometimes there were nuances that just didn't work, especially when you went on to, say, the mobile devices and using different platforms for control. It sometimes just didn't mesh very well. I mean, the thing about this one is that it's at first sounded, the alarm almost sounded as if it was the Mira, Reaper botnet. Remember that, where a lot of websites and financial institutions were shut down by IoTs that were compromised and computers that were compromised. This is a little bit different because you can't just replace, say, a PC. This one is a very short window, and I don't think it really affects your backward compatibility. Yes, there's an issue. Yes, the window is there, but it's a really short window. And I feel like reading this article. Yeah. Say again?
20 milliseconds.
20 milliseconds. Which seems like a short time, but if you've got an automated process and you're trying to do something, you could do it. And if you're someone who's on the inside, 20 milliseconds actually is a lot of time with a proper piece of software hacking tool to get what you want to get. You can latch on, it opens the port, you're done. But to that end, what I feel like is the first thing I thought was the Joe Strummer London Calling song. There's a line in there that says, you know what they say? Some of it was true. And that is really what we've got here. It's partly true, but it's really not anything to get upset about. It's a warning sign for us as an industry, but it's really not a global issue in my view. I think everybody, all the competitors have the same thing. I'm sure there's a port open for backwards compatibility in the core kernel of the code that could be problematic in a small window of opportunity.
Yeah.
It's really what we have to worry about as our own people. Does someone want to do something? Is someone within your organization looking to do something nefarious? Or even if it's just for fun? Hackers in the true sense of the word were about, can I do this? What can I learn? Which has turned into, what can I learn and how can I take it to my advantage? So to that end, yes, compatibility is an issue, but if you can mitigate the threat to some very small window, I don't think it's really anything to get your panties in a bunch about.
All right. Michael, I'm going to let you respond to George, but I also want to bring up a subject. Actually, I brought this up before we started recording, and you guys both jumped on me, so I thought it would be fun to do that again. I see this as a Windows XP issue, right? How long did Microsoft hold on to the lovely rolling hills of Windows XP until they finally said, you know what, screw it, we're not supporting this anymore. I'm sorry. I know it's I know you've had your Windows XP for 20 years, but probably 15, honestly, but we can't support it anymore. At what point does a manufacturer or even a software developer have to support a product that people may love and people may still use, but simply from a security standpoint, it's no longer financially viable?
Well, I think really in this particular case regarding the Z-Wave vulnerability, we're talking about apples and oranges here. Okay. This particular situation is a firmware update that actually affects hardware. So in order to maintain backward compatibility, the firmware has to have this capability that allows this vulnerability. It's just the way that they've designed the platform. If you were to eliminate that, then you eliminate backward compatibility, meaning you're rendering hardware devices inoperable. You have to have the new hardware to do that. Your correlation to Windows is a little bit different situation, right? You're talking about like a software support program and life cycle of a software product, something that can easily be installed onto existing hardware. Hardware is not an issue other than just raw capabilities in a Windows ecosystem. Whereas with this, you're talking about firmware on chip that is going to affect the life of the historic devices. So for people to replace 100 million pieces of hardware, we're talking door locks, lights, garage door openers, all that kind of stuff. We're not talking about just a software layer. So I want to kind of tail on to what George was saying. This particular vulnerability in and of itself, I believe is really a non-issue. There's a very specific set of circumstances that have to be met in a very short time frame and in a very specific distance in order for this to be an issue. So the likelihood of that really being compromised is very, very, very slim. However, this does bring to light an issue across our industry and the IoT industry as a whole, that as we go deeper and deeper down this road and security becomes more and more of a concern, that we are going to run into situations where hardware obsolescence is going to be an issue, and it's going to happen more rapidly than it's happened in the past, because we're depending more on hardware to accomplish the goals, not just the software layer to achieve the goals of the device, and from security to operability. So that is going to be an issue, and I think the consumer market is going to start to see that we don't want to buy and own these devices because we don't want to have to pay to replace them. They're going to pay for service. It's going to be hardware as a service. And I think we're going to see that start to transition more and more in this IoT space.
Okay, so this,
I like that a lot. That is something I've heard a lot about. Sorry to jump in on you.
No, you're
Tim.
fine.
No, go ahead.
It's something I've been hearing people saying, and it's akin to us saying, I would never store my files somewhere else. I would never use Word as a rental piece of software. I want it. What do we do now? As an organization, AVNation uses a Microsoft product that is rented.
yeah,
It's
basically.
perpetual licensing.
It's a subscription. Yeah, I mean,
well, and not, no, hang on, not for nothing. When we get done, recording this today, I'm going to drop this into an Adobe suite. That's also rented, to use George's words.
So we're going to see that more and more on the hardware side as well. You're not going to go buy a Nest thermostat. You're going to pay a Nest subscription that's going to include the hardware and include the refresh, because it's in Nest's best interest and it's in the consumer's best interest. Their profit margins go through the roof over the lifetime value of the customer, and then you get to maintain the highest quality and the most secure product that's available from them at that point in time.
Okay, so this brings in a totally different thing that I wasn't even planning on talking about. At what point then does this 8-10 years that people smarter than I have been talking about software, AV as a service, recurring revenue, all of this, when does that just kind of avalanche down to the bare bones of, clients don't want to own or don't need to own necessarily equipment? And the reason I bring that up is because of an interesting conversation that I had with a couple manufacturers and an integrator probably about a month ago. And the integrators were like, look, we're coming up against IT departments that are looking at us going, we understand what you're saying, right? And you're not incorrect, where in the IT world, a lot of times we lease or rent, to use George's words, equipment. But you're talking about two different buckets of money. You're talking about capital expenditures, CapEx, versus operating expenditures, OpEx. And it appears to me, at least, that we still have not gotten to the point where the AV equipment has moved from the CapEx column over to the OpEx column in any meaningful way. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're not wrong at all. And I think that the big reason behind that is because the life expectancy of AV equipment is still much longer than that of the typical IT piece of hardware.
But you just said it's not going to be.
IT hardware every 3 years.
You just said it's not going to be.
No. We're talking about AV. What we're talking about on the Z-Wave thing is IoT devices, Internet of Things devices that are Wi-Fi connected, that are control and automation. These aren't AV devices necessarily.
Okay,
there are AV devices
but
that
AV
are
devices
Z-Wave.
are quickly becoming, not in the truest sense, right? I'm not saying you're going to go down to Best Buy and drop it in your house, but they are quickly becoming network devices. And the argument could be made that a network device, almost by definition, is an IoT device because it does talk with other things and it does communicate with other devices. Yes, we have to do some other stuff and some programming to make that happen, but it's getting very quickly to the point where ProAV manufactured devices are on the network and they are communicating with other things. So that's almost the same as almost a pro version of IoT.
It could be. I mean, there's definitely an argument to be made on both sides of that line. But at the same time, I look at this and say, we're talking about a lock that maybe costs, I don't know, what's that lock cost? $300,
$200,
$500, something like that, right? Versus a $20,000, $30,000 projector. So when you start talking about from a fiscal standpoint, the depreciability of hardware it makes much more sense a lot of times to put those into capital acquisition when you're dropping $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into a conference room versus just putting out a $300 lock and a couple of smoke detectors and a few cameras. So that's much easier to put into a subscription service as an operational expense versus, forgoing the depreciation value and the depreciation income that comes from those larger assets.
Right. There's another question on this too, and it's operational. Do we have the staff in our mid-size to small size integrators to accomplish this? It's a lot of running around. It's, oh my God, this is the scheduled time for these guys to be swapped out or upgraded or whatever. And that's a problem for the small to mid-sized companies, right? That's staffing.
Most integrators are already running extremely inefficiently as it is.
Well, yes,
so then add to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's now. Does that present a danger to a consolidation happening in the industry because of that? It almost seemed like IoT would give us a greater berth and a greater ability to, put ourselves in different markets, but maybe not.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to another part of what the fine folks in the ProAV space have been doing, at least in jobs that I've been on. Let's put it that way. There are folks who use Cisco routers all day and Cisco switches all day, every day, and other really great ones. And there are also installations that I've been a part of where somebody's ran to Walmart or Best Buy because they needed a 5-port switch or a 10-port switch just to get stuff moving right inside their rack. And they'll go and they'll get a Netgear, or they'll get a Linksys, they'll get something else. Story comes to us from Krebs on Security. If you're not familiar with Krebs on Security, it's actually a good site for security, not to be silly. But Krebs writes about the FBI warning folks to update the firmware of certain routers and switches. He writes, the growing menace dubbed VPN filter targets Linksys, MikroTik, Netgear, and TP-Link networking equipment in the small and home office space, as well as QNAP, network-attached storage devices, NASs, according to researchers at Cisco. Mr. Drainer here, I'm going to start with you. At what point do we have to kind of bite the bullet and say, look, we can't go and start and keep putting in consumer electronics switches and consumer grade networking devices, even if it's a small office, right? Even if it's somebody doing a small commercial or light commercial, as some of the folks in the residential line have been doing. We have got to say, okay, you know what? Here's our bare minimum when it comes to security, when it comes to functionality. At what point does that happen?
It should have happened years ago.
Okay.
I mean, a long time ago. The fact that you can walk down any box store and pick up a cable router with Wi-Fi and a pseudo firewall for $60, the reality is you get what you pay for. Will it function? Sure. Will it do what it's intended to do? Sure it will. Will it do it well? That's a whole nother discussion. Will it do it safely? Probably not. So that's referenced throughout this article, right? The race to zero in hardware is just a volume game for these guys, right? They're all looking just to move a number of boxes, and they try to bring a level of security to it, but let's face the facts. At a $60, $70, $80 price point, there's only so much you can do. I don't recommend these products for residential clients, let alone any type of business application. So we should have stopped doing that a long time ago. You need to work within your organization and establish a minimum level of security that you're going to allow. Does that mean that things aren't compromisable? No, it doesn't. But as you move up the ranks, things tend to get better supported. You have more attention paid to things like security and ensuring that your devices are going to continue to operate the way that you need them to for the life of your customer.
All right. Mr. Tucker, same kind of question. When should we have stopped doing this?
Well, when I teach for CEDIA and I teach some of the internet connectivity classes, the first thing I say is enterprise class, enterprise class, enterprise class, period.
But
unfortunately,
it costs so much.
But unfortunately, we're dealing with what the Dead Kennedys album called the convenience or death. Mm-hmm. There are some things that we want our clients don't want to have to
Mr.
call
Tucker
you
just
for.
referenced the Dead Kennedys. I think that deserves notice.
And the class, the twofer today.
And the class.
Twofer.
Yeah.
So your convenience or death means that we want to use something called WPS, right? That gets us to automatically connect our devices. Excuse me. And WPS is the devil. Just like EDID is the devil, WPS is a different devil that is really just exposing you to anybody who wants to connect. And it's one of those things that we have to hammer in, is that it does cost more, as Michael said. And yes, but see, we want the cost to come down for convenience sake. But we need to be on our game to say our system as connected will be secure, especially in the time frame that we're saying, guess what? We're data acquisition. We're not just audio and video. Data acquisition is an inherent part of what we do. Whether we're actively using that data that we acquire or not, we're still acquiring it and it's accessible. Therefore, the onus is on us to make sure that it is not going to be used in untoward ways, right? And I think that's one of the more important ones is, yes, it's cheap. Yes, you can hang and bang. But guess what? If you're going to spend money on anything, in my opinion, it's going to be the quality of the flat panel, the speakers in your amp, and the quality of your backbone for your Ethernet internet. Everything else you can probably skim a bit about on and go with monoprice cables or whatever. You might be able to get away with that. But that stuff, man, you're not going to be able to get away with.
What is the price for security? You know, I had someone contact me the other day that called me up and said, hey, I got this notice from the FBI, you know, should I reboot my router? And I said, no, throw it away and go get a new one. Right? Here's a list I recommend.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
Well, I mean, I think the answer is right now, yes. Now, once you've rebooted it, go to the store, get one, and then replace it.
Here, go to Amazon. Here's a list of things that I recommend. Go buy one of these and then call me when it's here. We'll set it up for you, right?
Well, listen, the security goes even further because I said with the data acquisition, my kid got a bunch. It was his birthday recently. He got a bunch of gift cards. I wanted to check the values on them, right? He's been using them for different things. I can't access that website with a VPN.
Oh.
Why? The one thing I would want to access with a VPN is something that I want secure. Right. It's the same concept that we're so into that convenience or death, right? That ease of use, though, we don't always realize comes with a cost. You know, most people are on their mobile. The majority of people are on their mobile. That's what they're checking everything with. You know, like with sort of why I'm a Droid fan. You know, Apple still doesn't have really a VPN-ish. You know, they don't allow it on their apps. It's a tough nut to crack, as I said in the beginning. It's you got to really convince people that the effort and the inconvenience, the hassle, is well worth the end result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys, as we wrap up here, we mentioned that we're recording this right before InfoComm 2018. SDVOE, and real quickly, full disclosure, SDVOE is an underwriter of AVNation, and I'm actually doing one of these classes. They're doing these little 2020 classes in their booth all throughout InfoComm. They're calling it a quick refresher on the AV IT convergence and networking. And some of the classes they're doing, besides mine, which is called the Death Matrix Switch, is their life after death. It's at 12:30 on Wednesday, just in case you wanted to go. But they're doing networking made easy. They're doing new architectures that Justin Kennington, the head of the SDVO Alliance, he's doing the death of the Matrix. George, I want to start with you on this. This is an IT AV show, and that's geared towards the IT folks that have stuff, you know, AV stuff on their network. As more and more end users, or at least technology managers and IT managers, are going to the InfoComm show, by design, right? InfoComm, Avix is actively recruiting them. I'm an IT manager, and I come upon the SDVOE booth, and I've heard pitches or I've gotten proposals that has AV over the network, and I may have gotten one from an SD, you know, that includes an SDVOE technology. I stop and I watch one of these classes. As an IT professional, what am I looking to get away or take away from these classes? What do I need to know from these AV over IP manufacturers to make me feel, you know, warm and fuzzy putting AV on the network?
I need to know how much bandwidth I need and how I compensate for what I don't have.
Okay.
Right. I think that sums it up pretty well. Right. What quality of video do I need to deliver, and what infrastructure do I need to deliver it on? Cost being an analysis, or cost being a very critical thing. Sometimes we want to put it on the same network as our regular data, and that's problematic. We can all go into that. That's a class in and of itself. But I think that's what they're looking at. Hey, do I need to run my own system? Can I put it over the standard data network? Which ones can I? Which ones can't I? You know, you're talking 1080p, you're talking 4K. and you're talking 4K. I'm sorry, what did I say? 4K, 8K in the next couple of years, right?
You multiply
the next number of years, you need to be able to handle 8K. Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'm looking for is, do I know enough to be able to set up those systems so that they can go through, and I don't have to hear from my clients that the live feed doesn't work, the presentation was in and out, that kind of stuff. I don't know if they really need to know about video in essence. There's a primer I think on here's your quality of video, here's what it takes. Do they really need to know all the rest about color sampling and chroma sampling and all the rest of that stuff? It's probably handy information, but I don't think that that's the stuff that they really need to know.
All right. Michael, and with you on here as we wrap up, you have direct contact with a lot of your clients that are IT and putting systems in. What do they care about when it comes to the video quality of their systems?
They want it to be dependable. They want it to work, right? They have an expectation that things are going to be clear and that they're going to be latent free, or as latent free as can be expected given the applications, and that they can see what they need to see, right? I mean, that's the goal of every video distribution system. So what I really respect is SDVOE's efforts here to make sure that the integration market is educated, that they have the resources that they need to be successful with their implementations, as well as any other implementation, because these concepts and theories pass right on down to everything that involves the network, right, in any type of video transport. So I'm really glad to see that they're doing that. At the end of the day, it's about the consumer's results. What are their expectations? Are you managing those expectations? And are you deploying platforms that can support those expectations and deliver them dependably and reliably?
All right, very good. That'll be a good place to stop. Mr. Michael Drainer, where do people find you or Drainer Technologies?
DrainerTechnologies.com.
All right, very good. Mr. Tucker, I will see your bright and shining face in about 3 days' time. So between now and then, because then I can tell people where to find you. Between now and then, how do people get a hold of you?
On social media, I am Tucker2s on almost all of them. I write for several of the more popular trade magazines and for AVNation.
All right, very good. Thank you guys so much. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me on any social media because at this point, I'm honestly rooting for the Golden Knights. I'm sorry. I'm a Western Conference boy. I bleed blue. Go Blues. But there's something about the Golden Knights that are just impressive.
They've got a capital killer in goal.
Oh, and they're freaking good. I mean, just darn good. But yeah, so I'll be talking about hockey at least for the next couple of days. But go by the website if you would, please, AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others, including our 2 weekly news programs. One looks at the residential side of AV called Resi Week, hosted by our buddy Matt Scott, and the other one looks at the commercial AV news hosted by me called AV Week. All that and more at AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv.